Something about those eyes never felt right, too calm, too steady, too heavy for a man who claimed he could simply help people relax. People said he could take your fear, your stress, your pain, but sometimes he took much more. And in this case, when a teacher became a stage hypnotist and a student became his final audience, the truth that emerged was darker than anything the investigators had ever seen. "Look into my eyes." That was the line he used to change lives. And eventually to end one. This is the story they tried to hide. This is the story that will stay with you long after the final word. The story begins long before the crime, back when he was known as Mr. Levin, just a quiet school teacher in a plain blue shirt, walking the hallways like he barely existed. He was the kind of guy people labeled harmless, soft-spoken, a little awkward, a man who blended into crowds so easily that he practically disappeared. But behind that gentle smile, something else was growing, something hungry. His fascination started small. A late-night YouTube video about hypnosis, a book he bought on impulse, a podcast about the power of suggestion. He became obsessed with the idea that minds were doors, and he could learn how to open them. Students joked that he stared too long during conversations. Parents said he was unusually persuasive for someone so quiet. But no one thought much of it, not in the beginning. The shift came slowly. He stopped hanging around the teacher's lounge, stopped talking to coworkers, started hosting free after-school sessions he called stress release workshops. And that was where he met her. A 17-year-old senior named Elise Hartman, smart, ambitious, trusting, the kind of girl who believed everyone had good intentions. She went to the session because she thought it might help her stay focused for finals. She never imagined it would be the beginning of something she couldn't control. The first session was harmless. He taught breathing techniques, light suggestions, focus exercises, but every week he added a little more. A slower voice, a stronger pull, a deeper silence, and Elise didn't realize what was happening. Not until she started waking up in places she didn't remember walking to. Not until she found her notes were written in handwriting that wasn't hers. Not until she caught herself repeating phrases he used in class like they were her own thoughts. Her friends noticed the change. Her mother noticed the change. Even her track coach pulled her aside one afternoon, saying she looked spaced out and disconnected. But Elise kept going to the workshops. She didn't know why she felt drawn back. She only knew she felt different after leaving them, lighter, distant, almost numb. Around this time, rumors began spreading about Levin. A parent filed a concern report saying their daughter felt uncomfortable around him. Another mentioned strange messages he sent online, but every complaint was brushed off. He was polite. He was calm. He was convincing, and that was the first injustice that shaped this case. Red flags were everywhere, waving loud and bright, but no one wanted to believe a quiet schoolteacher could cross a line. No one noticed his transformation until it was too late. Because while his reputation in school crumbled, his fame outside school exploded. Within months, Levin reinvented himself as a stage hypnotist. Clubs invited him. Events booked him. He wore darker clothes now, spoke with more confidence, created a persona that made people lean in instead of look away. He called himself the Mind Archer, and people loved him, but fame brought ego. Ego brought control, and control brought danger. Back in school, Elise faded further. Her grades dropped. Her focus disappeared, and the nights she couldn't remember became more frequent. One Friday afternoon, she disappeared for 3 hours after class. Her mother found her walking home barefoot, holding her shoes like she didn't know what they were. Elise couldn't explain where she'd been, or why her phone had 30 missed calls, or why she felt like she was waking from a dream she didn't choose. The investigators would later call this the turning point, the moment everything slid from strange to sinister, because this was the same weekend Levin held his biggest show yet, a packed warehouse, hundreds of fans. Lights, cameras, music, and in the corner of a backstage photograph, partly blurred but unmistakable, there she was, Elise, looking lost, looking dazed, looking like she belonged to someone else now. That single photo became the first solid clue, the first thread investigators pulled. But before the truth could even begin to surface, tragedy struck. 2 days after the show, Elise's mother opened her bedroom door and found her daughter unconscious on the floor. Faint breathing, fixed pupils, a calm expression that felt unnatural. Doctors said it was an induced dissociative state, something triggered, something deep, and when investigators questioned Levin, he acted shocked, concerned, heartbroken, but there was something strange about the way he looked at them, something steady, something rehearsed. The lead investigator wrote in his report that Levin's gaze felt heavier than normal, like he was trying to pull their thoughts somewhere else, like he wanted to guide their questions without speaking. That was the moment suspicion turned into certainty. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't stress. This wasn't a coincidence. This was control. And just when investigators thought they reached the bottom of it, they discovered something else, something darker, something hidden behind a locked room in Levin's small apartment. Inside his desk drawer, under stacks of old worksheets and performance pamphlets, they found a small memory card. On it was a single video file. The screen showed a dim room, a chair, a shadow standing in front of a camera, a voice instructing someone to look into their eyes, and then, at the very end of the clip, barely visible in the grainy frame, there was a young girl sitting in the chair, Elise, and just before the file cut off, her eyes flicked upward, fully open, completely empty. The discovery of that memory card changed everything. Up until that moment, investigators thought they were dealing with an inappropriate teacher or a manipulative performer. But the video revealed something far more controlled, far more deliberate, and far more disturbing. Because Elise wasn't resisting, she wasn't confused, she wasn't fighting to wake up. She sat there with the calm, blank stare of someone whose mind had been taken apart piece by piece. And Levin wasn't just experimenting. He was practicing. The team watched the clip again and again, noticing details they missed the first time. A metronome ticking faintly in the background, a pattern of lights blinking behind the camera. Subtle techniques that train the brain to drift and disconnect. None of this was amateur work. This was engineered. Investigators began digging deeper, pulling his financial records, his emails, his performance receipts. That was when another red flag exploded into view. Levin had been buying specialized equipment, neuroinduction devices, visual entrainment tools, books written only for licensed clinicians, and that was the second injustice of the case. He had access to tools that no one questioned because nobody bothered to look. While the department built their case, Elise remained unconscious in the hospital, her mind flickering between sleep and something deeper. Doctors said it wasn't natural, more like a command that hadn't been released. Her mother stayed by her bedside every hour, terrified that if she blinked, her daughter might slip further away. Back in the station, detectives kept asking the same question. How did he get this far without anyone stopping him? The answer came when they interviewed his former coworkers at the school. Everyone had the same reaction: surprise, confusion, and then, slowly, fear. One teacher remembered a strange conversation months earlier. Another recalled staying late one night and hearing Levin in his classroom speaking in a slow, measured rhythm to an empty room. A custodian mentioned finding students asleep during his after-school workshops, sitting upright like statues. The signs were there, but subtle, easy to ignore, and intentionally hidden. The biggest break came from a tech specialist who recovered deleted files from the memory card. Most of the footage was corrupt, but one fragment survived. It showed a notebook, Levin's handwriting, page after page of observation logs. He wasn't just hypnotizing Elise, he was tracking her reactions. recording every blink, every breath change, every time her voice softened or her posture slumped. She wasn't a student to him. She was a subject. The more investigators read, the deeper the disgust grew. His notes described sessions in cold, clinical language, commands given, commands obeyed, commands refined, and at the bottom of one page, written in rushed, uneven letters, there was a single chilling line. "She is nearly ready. Ready for what?" That became the driving question. As they pieced together timelines, the picture sharpened: the shows, the after-school sessions, the missing hours, the sudden personality changes. And then they found the last piece. A stage crew member from the warehouse performance came forward, shaking, pale, eyes wide like he had been carrying a secret too heavy for months. He claimed Levin had a private room backstage. No one was allowed inside, but on the night of the big show, he saw Levin leading a girl into that room. She was quiet, slow-moving, and walking barefoot, the same way Elise was found days later. That statement pushed the case into overdrive. Warrants filed, search teams dispatched. Tracking his movements became the department's top priority. But Levin was already slipping through their fingers. He stopped performing, stopped going home, stopped using his bank cards. It was like he evaporated into thin air. Investigators began checking abandoned buildings, storage units, old job sites, anything that might hold the key to where he ran or what he planned to do next. That was when they uncovered the third twist, one that turned suspicion into raw panic. A hotel in another part of the city reported a strange checkout, a room booked under a false name with a note left behind. It wasn't a letter, it wasn't a confession, it was a set of instructions, step-by-step directions for inducing a trance, the same method used on Elise, written as if he wanted someone else to follow them. The lead investigator felt a cold wave hit. This wasn't just about Elise anymore. This wasn't a one-time obsession. Levin had been building something larger, a system, a blueprint for control. If he went this far with one student, who else was he planning to use? Or worse, who had he already used? Everything pointed to the same terrifying conclusion. This man believed he had the power to rewrite minds, and now he was on the run with nothing to lose. Late one evening, just when it seemed like the case was spiraling into chaos, a call came in from a woman who worked at a small motel outside the city. She recognized Levin from the news. He had checked in 2 nights earlier. Alone, carrying nothing but a backpack and a small case, officers rushed to the location. They expected a fight, a chase, some kind of confrontation, but the room was empty. No Levin, no bags, just a mirror propped against the wall, a chair facing it, and a small audio device still playing on loop. A slow voice, measured, steady: "Look into your eyes. Your mind is quiet. Your thoughts are open." It wasn't meant for a victim. It was meant for himself. He had been practicing deeper techniques, preparing, strengthening his own trances, and that was the most frightening discovery so far. He wasn't just learning how to control others. He was learning how to lock himself into a mindset where fear, guilt, hesitation meant nothing. The investigators realized they weren't chasing an unstable teacher anymore. They were hunting someone who had convinced himself he was untouchable. And right when hope started slipping away, a final twist dropped into their hands. A dashcam video surfaced from a driver who passed a walking figure along a rural highway that same night. The timestamp was hours after Levin left the motel. The frame was dark, blurry, but clear enough to recognize the shape. A man in black, hood up, carrying a familiar backpack, but he wasn't alone. Walking a few steps behind him, barefoot, head down, moving like a shadow pulled by a string, was a second figure, a girl, and she looked just like Elise. The dashcam footage hit the investigation like a bolt of electricity. If the girl behind Levin truly was Elise, it meant she had somehow left the hospital, walked out, followed him, obeyed him, all without resistance. The idea was terrifying, because it meant his control ran deeper than anyone understood. But when the hospital staff was questioned, the truth unfolded fast. Elise hadn't walked out on her own. She had been taken. At some point during a shift change, a nurse noticed the hallway lights flickering. Security cameras showed a man in a hooded jacket walking calmly through restricted areas, never looking up, never rushing. And behind him, Elise walked barefoot, her expression blank, her steps steady, her focus locked onto him like he was a magnet. The footage sent a shiver through every investigator watching it. It wasn't an escape. It wasn't a kidnapping in the traditional sense. It was obedience. They traced Levin's path from the hospital to the rural highway, then into the woods beyond. He was leading her somewhere remote, somewhere quiet, somewhere no one could interrupt what he planned to do next. But investigators weren't about to let that happen. For the next 2 hours, search teams moved through the woods with everything from K9 units to drones, sweeping every trail and clearing every abandoned cabin. The forest felt alive with tension, branches snapping, voices echoing, shadows shifting, and then they found it, an old, half-collapsed cabin sitting at the edge of a dried creek bed. A single lantern glowed inside. Soft, steady, almost rhythmic, just like his voice. Officers approached carefully, expecting traps or resistance. But when they stepped into the doorway, what they saw froze them in place. Elise sat in the center of the room, facing a mirror. Her posture straight, her eyes glassy, her breathing shallow. The lantern's light flickered across her expression, making her look like a ghost trapped inside her own body. And behind her, standing just out of the reflection's reach, was Levin. He wasn't frightened, he wasn't panicking. He simply watched her, completely focused, as if the world outside that cabin didn't exist. For a moment, no one moved. The cabin air felt thick, like stepping into someone else's dream. Then something shifted. Elise blinked, a slow, mechanical blink. Detectives realized she wasn't fully aware of the room. She was locked inside a suggestion loop, a trance so deep that pulling her out too quickly could cause permanent damage. This was the moment the lead investigator knew the only way forward wasn't force. It was strategy. Levin wasn't going to attack them. He wasn't going to run. He believed he was winning. That arrogance became his downfall. The lead investigator stepped forward, keeping his voice steady, neutral, controlled. He didn't yell. He didn't threaten. He spoke with the same calm rhythm Levin used, not to hypnotize, but to break the pattern. He moved slowly toward Elise, blocking Levin's line of sight to her reflection. If he could interrupt the visual trigger, the trance might weaken. For the first time, Levin's expression changed, not panic. Not anger, confusion. He took one step forward, trying to regain control, but officers flanked him instantly, holding him in place. He didn't fight. He didn't scream. He simply stared at the investigator with an unsettling calm, as if he believed he still had the upper hand. But the mirror was blocked, the loop was interrupted, and Elise's trance began to fracture. Her shoulders twitched, her breathing hitched, her eyes darted left, then right, as if searching for something familiar, something stable. Her mind wasn't fully hers yet, but the spell was breaking. Slowly, tentatively, painfully, Levin whispered something under his breath. Nothing coherent. Just fragments of the script he had burned into her subconscious. But it was too late. The investigator leaned down, speaking to Elise with the gentleness of someone pulling a child from a nightmare. Her eyes fluttered, her expression softened, and with one shaky exhale, she finally returned. The cabin erupted into motion. Officers secured Levin. Medical staff rushed in to evaluate Elise. The moment she recognized her mother at the clearing outside, she collapsed into her arms, sobbing in confusion, fear, and release. The spell was broken, but the damage left behind would take much longer to heal. Back at the station, Levin sat calmly in the interrogation room, hands folded, eyes locked forward. He didn't speak unless spoken to. He didn't deny anything. He didn't defend himself. When investigators asked why he did it, he only offered one chilling statement: "Control brings clarity." Those words became the headline of every news story that followed, because they revealed everything about who he truly was, a man who believed other people's minds were his to shape, his to manipulate, his to erase. The trial that followed was relentless. Expert witnesses testified about the dangers of deep hypnotic suggestion. Neuroscientists explained how repetition and psychological vulnerability could alter a person's sense of will. Elise bravely took the stand, describing the moments she remembered and the terrifying blanks she didn't. Every detail painted the same picture. Levin hadn't just crossed a moral line, he had obliterated it. When the verdict came, the courtroom held its breath. He was found guilty on every count: unlawful psychological manipulation, kidnapping through coercion, reckless endangerment, felony assault through induced mental distress. The sentence was severe: decades behind bars, no early release, no privileges. His life of control was over. But the most powerful moment came after the sentencing, when Elise walked out of the courthouse into the sunlight. Her expression soft, her eyes clear, her steps steady. There was something symbolic in that moment. She had been stripped of her will, her clarity, her freedom, but she had reclaimed it all. Poetic justice hit in the final twist. The same eyes Levin used to manipulate her were now powerless. The same voice that once controlled her meant nothing. And the man who believed he could rewrite minds ended up trapped inside the one place he couldn't escape: his own. He was led away in silence, no applause, no spectacle, just the quiet, steady footsteps of a man who finally understood the truth. He never controlled anyone. He only controlled the illusion, and illusions always break. The final shot of this story is simple: a girl standing in the sunlight, a monster locked behind a heavy steel door, and a truth that echoes long after the last word. Some eyes don't hypnotize, some eyes reveal, and when justice looked into his, it saw everything he tried to hide.